Humble girl's kindness moves millionaire on the day he lost his daughter. Welcome to my YouTube channel, Truth Untold Story. Which country are you watching this video from? If you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell for more emotional stories every day. The rain tapped gently against the tall glass windows of the mansion, a soft, rhythmic sound that filled the hollow silence of the grand estate. Outside, the sky wept grey tears over the city, but inside, the storm had long since taken root in the heart of one man. Mr. Raymond Steele sat hunched in a velvet armchair near the cold fireplace, a porcelain mug of untouched coffee growing colder in his hand. The room smelled faintly of dust, aged wood, and something heavier, the scent of loss that no cleaning crew had ever been able to wipe away. The digital clock on the mantel blinked, July 4th, 7:03 a.m. Another year, another birthday without her. He blinked slowly, as if waking from a dream that never ended. 2 years had passed, yet the grief felt fresh, like it had only just happened. It didn't fade, it didn't soften, it simply learned how to hide better. But on this day, it rose, raw and unfiltered, straight to the surface. The mansion, once alive with laughter and footsteps and soft lullabies, stood now like a museum of a life that used to be. Emily's room remained untouched, every stuffed animal still in place, every drawing still taped to the wall. Raymond had built empires with steel and ambition, but he could not rebuild the one thing he truly cared about. He had all the wealth in the world, but none of it could buy back the sound of her giggle in the hallway. He used to be a man of schedules, sharp suits, ringing phones, but now, on this day, time stood still. The curtains remained drawn, the house dimly lit, as though even the light knew not to intrude on this morning. He picked up a small framed photo from the table beside him. Emily, age 8, wearing a paper crown made of gold foil, her cheeks smeared with cake, her smile so wide it nearly broke him. That was the last birthday he celebrated with her, the one before the accident, the one before his world collapsed quietly and completely. He remembered holding her hand on that day, never knowing it would be one of the last. His hands trembled now as he held the frame, not from age, but from memory. The kind that hits you so hard it knocks the breath from your lungs even years after the moment passed. Raymond had once hosted galas, made headlines, signed million-dollar deals. Now he was just a man with a memory and a mansion. People tried to reach out at first. Friends, colleagues, journalists. But grief doesn't leave room for conversation. So he stopped answering calls. He stopped accepting dinner invitations. Even his closest business partners stopped asking after a while. Everyone moved on. Except him. Every July 4th became a day to vanish from the world, to disappear into shadows and let the sorrow speak for itself. He didn't want sympathy. He didn't need distraction. He only wanted stillness. The rain fell harder now, as if the heavens themselves mourned with him. He didn't light a candle. He didn't bring out the cake mix she used to love. Some years he tried. Last year he'd sat in the kitchen for hours holding a balloon, but it deflated in his hand before he could tie it. This year he couldn't even bring himself to leave the chair. There were no maids in the house today. He'd given the staff the day off. No one should have to walk through a house that mourns, no one except the man who built it. Outside, thunder rumbled low, a distant echo of a grief too heavy to roar. Inside, Raymond finally set the photo down, carefully, reverently, like it might shatter. He glanced at the untouched cake box on the counter. He had ordered it out of habit, a small chocolate cake, her favorite, but he couldn't eat it. He hadn't tasted chocolate since the day he lost her. He closed his eyes, not to sleep, to remember her laugh, her smell, her tiny fingers gripping his. He whispered her name under his breath as though saying it aloud would somehow bring her closer. Emily. And for a moment, just one moment, he swore he felt her presence in the room, as soft and fleeting as the rain on the glass. Just 5 blocks away from Raymond Steele's silent mansion, life moved at a slower, softer rhythm. The roads were cracked, the houses leaned with age, but the neighborhood breathed with warmth and humble resilience. Inside a small apartment above a corner grocery store, 9-year-old Mia sat cross-legged on the faded carpet of her bedroom. A glass jar rested in front of her, nearly full, not of bills or fancy coins, but of pennies, nickels, and a few crumpled tens. She twisted off the metal lid with care, her fingers stained with marker ink and a little dried glue from the birthday card she had made the night before. The jar had once held pickles. Now it held purpose. One by one, she counted the coins aloud. 16, 17, $18.40. It was enough, barely, to buy the cake she'd been eyeing in the window of Mr. Ravi's bakery down the street. Her mother, worn thin from double shifts at the laundromat, had no idea what Mia was up to. She'd simply smiled when Mia said, "I'm saving for something sweet, but it's not for me." For weeks, Mia had watched the man in the park, always in the same seat, always alone, wearing the same grey suit that looked more tired than he did. She didn't know his name. She didn't need to. There was a weight in the way he moved, like every step he took carried a memory too heavy to bear, and he never looked at people, just at the sky, as if searching for someone who never came back. He reminded her of the sad paintings at the library, the ones that made her chest ache without knowing why. He looked like he was waiting for something, or someone. Maybe both. Most people passed him by. Some avoided eye contact. Some whispered. But Mia had always believed that the people no one sees are the ones who need kindness the most. Last Saturday, she had asked the bakery lady, "How much is the small chocolate cake with the little hearts?" $18, the lady had replied. So Mia saved every coin from her lunch change after school. She skipped gum, stickers, even a toy she'd wanted for months. Each time she dropped a coin into the jar, she whispered, "This is for him." She didn't know his story, only that his silence spoke louder than words. Today felt like the right day. Something in the air, maybe the soft rain tapping the window or the way the wind moved the trees like they were waving, told her this was the day to give. She slipped on her rain boots, the yellow ones with the frog faces, and zipped up her pink hoodie with the fraying sleeves. The jar clinked gently in her backpack as she crept out quietly. She didn't want her mum to stop her. As she walked toward the bakery, her reflection winked at her in the puddles dotting the sidewalk. She smiled back, nervous but sure. Her heart beat fast, but it wasn't fear. It was hope. At the bakery, she placed the jar on the counter. "I want the heart cake," she said softly. The lady looked at the coins, then at Mia's hopeful eyes. Without a word, she smiled and began boxing the cake. Mia clutched it carefully in both hands, the white box tied with a red ribbon that bounced as she walked. She passed flower shops, empty cafes, and old newspaper stands, but her eyes stayed on the path ahead. When she reached the park, her shoes made small splashes. The bench was there, and so was he. Sitting with his back straight, umbrella closed at his side, his gaze locked upward, unmoving. She paused behind a tree for a moment, heart thudding, thoughts swirling. What if he didn't like cake? What if he thought she was strange? But then she remembered her mother's words. Kindness is never wrong. So she stepped out slowly, the cake box trembling just a little in her small hands. She walked toward the bench, raindrops landing gently on the ribbon, and though she didn't know it, with each step, she was changing a life. The park was nearly empty that morning, the drizzle keeping most people indoors. A few leaves clung stubbornly to the trees, while puddles reflected the quiet grey of the sky. Mia stood a few feet away from the bench. She could see him, just as before, his back straight, his coat buttoned high, his right hand holding a photo worn at the corners. He didn't notice her at first. His eyes were locked on the image, his thumb gently brushing its surface, as though trying to touch a memory that no longer had form. Her sneakers squeaked faintly on the wet path as she took a cautious step forward. Then, another. The cake in her hands felt heavier now, like it carried more than frosting. The wind picked up slightly, brushing her hood off her head. She didn't fix it. She was focused on him, the man who looked like he hadn't smiled in years, the one her heart, somehow, wouldn't let her walk past today. With trembling fingers, she clutched the box closer to her chest. Her small voice barely rose above the wind. "Excuse me?" He turned slowly, blinking as though woken from a trance. His eyes, once sharp and commanding in boardrooms, now looked tired, not just from lack of sleep, but from carrying something far heavier than time. Mia held the cake out toward him, her arms shaking slightly. The white box was a little damp from the mist, the red ribbon had loosened, and the smudged frosting inside bore 5 words written with a shaky pink icing tube. "For someone who deserves to smile today." He stared at it. Confused at first, his eyes darted from the box to her face, then back again. A pause, long and uncertain, filled the space between them. "Is this for me?" he finally asked, voice rough like gravel. She gave a small nod, hugging the box close before offering it again. "You look sad, and my mum says cake helps." Her cheeks flushed, unsure if she had done something wrong, but she didn't back away. Raymond's fingers hovered over the box, as if afraid touching it might break something, not the cake, but the fragile barrier he'd built around himself. Then, with care, he accepted it. His hands, strong hands that once signed billion-dollar deals, now trembled slightly as he took hold of the box. He looked down at the icing, the words. His lips parted, but no words came. For the first time in 2 years, someone had offered him something with no strings, no expectations, no knowledge of who he was or what he'd lost. I don't know what to say," he whispered. Mia smiled softly, brushing a strand of wet hair from her cheek. "You don't have to say anything." She plopped down on the edge of the bench beside him, legs swinging. Raymond blinked again, unsure of what to do with the presence beside him. He looked down at her muddy sneakers, the frog faces grinning up at him. She didn't speak, didn't pry, just sat there in the quiet, like it was the most normal thing in the world. After a long silence, he glanced at the photo in his other hand. He hesitated, then gently placed it face down on his knee. His thumb traced the edge of the cake box. Chocolate. Her favorite. "Did you make this?" he asked, still dazed. She giggled. "I wish I bought it, with my coin jar." He let out a breath, half a chuckle, mostly disbelief. "You used your savings? For me?" She nodded. "You looked like someone who forgot how to have cake days." He didn't respond immediately. His throat tightened, emotions swelling like a wave he couldn't stop. He hadn't heard words like that since... "Thank you," he said quietly. And somehow, those 2 words felt louder than any speech he'd ever given. Raymond stared at the white cake box resting on his lap, the rain around them falling softer now, like it too was listening. His thumb ran gently over the edge of the box, before he looked down at the little girl beside him. She wasn't speaking. She wasn't watching him closely or expecting anything in return. She was just there, present, calm, and still, like she had nowhere more important to be. His fingers hesitated at first, then turned the photograph over. It was old, worn around the edges, the colors slightly faded from being held too often, but the smile on the child's face remained bright, untouched by time. "This," he said, voice barely above a whisper, "is my daughter, Emily." His words trembled in the air between them, as if he hadn't said her name aloud in a long, long time. Mia leaned in, eyes soft. She didn't gasp or say, "I'm sorry," like most people did. She simply looked at the picture, like it deserved her full attention. The girl in the photo had wild, curly blonde hair and a missing tooth right in the center of her smile. She wore a glittery crown made of cardboard and was mid-laugh, frosting on her cheek. Raymond's lips pressed together tightly, his eyes misting not from the rain, but from memory. "She was turning 8 in this picture," he said slowly. "She always wanted to dress like a princess, even in pajamas." He chuckled once under his breath, but the sound cracked in the middle. She loved chocolate cake, not just the flavor, she loved the way it made a day feel like a celebration. His hands trembled as he held the photo out to Mia. She reached out, touched only the corner, gently. "She looks like someone who liked to make people laugh," she said. Raymond smiled softly, eyes lowered. "She did. Always." He turned the photo back toward himself, staring at it like he was trying to memorize it all over again. "The last birthday we had together, she asked for a picnic in the living room, with balloons and stories." Mia didn't interrupt. She just swung her feet slowly beneath the bench, watching him without pushing him. That quiet patience felt like a gift. He took a shaky breath. "I never knew grief could live in silence for this long." The rain stopped, as if even the sky knew to pause for a moment. "I miss her every day," he whispered. "But today, it hurts more." Mia nodded once, gently. "I think birthdays are like candles. They leave light behind, even after they go out." Raymond turned to her, eyes slightly wide at the unexpected wisdom. She didn't flinch under his gaze. He looked back at the picture again, his chest rising and falling as though breathing suddenly felt different. "It's been 2 years," he said, "yet somehow I still expect to hear her running down the stairs." The wind moved slowly through the trees, leaves rustling like soft applause in the background. Mia kept her hands folded on her lap. She wasn't there to fix anything. She just stayed. He placed the photo back into the inside pocket of his coat. "I thought I'd forgotten how to talk about her," he admitted. "But you didn't ask anything, you just let me remember her." Mia shrugged lightly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Sometimes stories tell themselves." Raymond leaned back against the bench, the cake still resting in his lap, untouched, but no longer alone. The ache in his chest hadn't disappeared, but it had loosened, just enough to let breath move through it. "Thank you," he said again, this time more firmly, not just for the cake or the company, but for allowing a moment of truth to surface without fear of it sinking again. The photograph, warm from his coat pocket, seemed to press against his heart, like a reminder, not just of what he'd lost, but of what was still left. Memory, love, and maybe a new kind of connection. They sat there a while longer, not speaking much more, but saying everything that needed to be said in the stillness of a bench, a photo, and a smudged chocolate cake. A soft breeze passed through the park, ruffling the tops of the trees like invisible fingers brushing through hair. Raymond stared at the cake, the photo of Emily now tucked close to his heart. Beside him, Mia's small hands reached into her pocket with care. She pulled out a thin, pink birthday candle, the kind you'd see on cupcakes at school parties or homemade cakes on kitchen counters. Its wax was slightly bent from being carried all morning, but it was still whole, still able to shine. "I brought this just in case," she said quietly. "I didn't know why, but I thought maybe we could light it for her." Her words fell gently between them, like petals landing on still water. Raymond looked at her, blinking back the sting in his eyes. A part of him wanted to look away, but the other part, the part that remembered laughter and bedtime stories, nodded slowly, letting emotion rise to the surface. "Thank you," he murmured, his voice uneven. He took the candle from her small palm, holding it like something sacred. Mia opened the cake box, revealing the smudged but heartfelt icing inside. She peeled back the paper lining with care. Raymond leaned in and gently pressed the candle into the center of the cake. It stood slightly tilted, leaning just a little, not perfect, but full of intention. Just like the girl they were honoring. Mia pulled a small matchbox from her hoodie. "I borrowed it from my mum's candle drawer," she confessed, her voice a whisper of mischief and meaning. "I wanted to be ready." Raymond smiled faintly, his hands cupping hers as she struck the match. A small flame bloomed, dancing at the tip, flickering uncertainly in the damp air. He leaned closer to shield the flame from the breeze. Together, they lowered it to the candle, watching as the tiny wick caught fire, its glow golden and fragile under the grey sky. Neither of them spoke right away. The moment asked for silence, for breath, for presence. The flame wobbled gently in the wind, but it held on. Just like love does, even when everything else fades. Raymond stared at the flickering light, his throat thick, heart thudding in a rhythm long forgotten. He didn't see the cake anymore. He saw her. Emily, wearing her cardboard crown, laughing as frosting dripped from her chin, asking for just one more candle, Daddy. His lips parted slowly, the words rising like an old song remembered. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," he whispered. His voice cracked halfway through, but the words left his lips, and with them a weight that had sat on his chest for 2 long years. The kind of weight that no wealth, no power, no distraction could lift. Only love, remembered and spoken, could. Mia didn't interrupt. She watched the flame, her eyes reflecting its soft shimmer, her hands clasped in her lap like she, too, was honoring someone sacred. A single tear slipped down Raymond's cheek. He didn't wipe it away. He let it fall, freely, finally, into the moment that had waited years to arrive. The candle glowed on, steady despite the wind. A small defiance against the sorrow of the world, a soft rebellion in honor of memory, and the quiet healing that kindness brings. The park, once heavy with silence, now felt like it was holding its breath with them. And though the sky was still gray, something warm had broken through. Raymond closed his eyes for a moment, letting the warmth of the candles soak into his chest. It didn't erase the pain, but it reminded him that love still lived, even in the quiet. And as the candle continued to burn, so did the flicker of something he hadn't felt in a long time. The candle had nearly melted down, its tiny flame still glowing bravely on top of the cake. Raymond stared at it for a while longer, his hands resting calmly in his lap for the first time in years. Mia stood slowly, brushing droplets from her knees. Her socks were damp, and her hoodie hung heavy with rain, but her spirit felt light, as though she'd done what she came to do, without ever knowing why it mattered so much. Raymond turned to her with a quiet smile, one that didn't reach all the way to joy, but stretched far enough to cross the distance between loss and light. "You really are something special," he murmured. Mia fidgeted with her sleeve before reaching into her pocket again. "I almost forgot," she said, her voice soft but sure. "I made you something." She pulled out a small, folded piece of blue construction paper. It was a little wrinkled, its edges curled slightly from the rain. The handwriting on the front was messy but full of care. Inside, drawn in colored pencil, was a heart wrapped in a ribbon and surrounded by stars. The words were written in big, uneven letters. "You're not alone. Some hearts see what eyes can't." Raymond's breath caught in his throat. He held the card as though it were made of glass. He stared at the message, reading it once, twice, as if he needed the truth to sink deep enough to reach the places he'd kept locked for so long. "I wrote that last night," Mia said. "I didn't know who I'd give it to, but this morning I just knew." Her voice was gentle, like a lullaby meant for broken hearts. Raymond blinked slowly, his thumb tracing over the uneven handwriting. Of all the cards he'd ever received, for birthdays, business wins, even condolences, none had landed like this. "Thank you," he said again, but it felt too small. Words couldn't quite match the weight of being seen when you've spent years invisible behind grief. Still, it was all he had. Mia gave a quiet smile and turned to go, her small frame walking away under the grey sky, her yellow boots splashing through puddles as though they were stepping stones instead of water. Raymond watched her until she turned the corner and disappeared. The park felt quiet again, but not empty. The bench beside him still held warmth, and the space around him no longer felt like a cage. He sat for a while longer, watching the final wisp of the candle curl into the breeze, until even that delicate flame had fulfilled its purpose. Later that evening, back in his mansion, Raymond stepped through the quiet halls, noticing how the floorboards didn't echo quite as much. The silence hadn't gone, it had just softened. He walked past the living room, past the untouched dining table, and paused at a door he hadn't opened in months. Emily's room. His hand hovered on the knob, then slowly turned it. The door creaked gently as it opened, revealing the room just as she'd left it. He walked in, his footsteps slow, reverent. On the little white desk sat Emily's journal, its sparkly cover faded but familiar. He picked it up, held it against his chest, and sat on her bed. The room smelled faintly of old crayons and lavender lotion, the same scent he used to tuck her in with. He opened the journal and flipped through the pages. Drawings, stickers, little dreams scribbled in purple ink. Then he turned to the next blank page. His hand shook slightly as he picked up the pen beside it, and for the first time in years, he wrote. Not for business, not for the public, for her. July 4th. Today an angel reminded me how to feel again. Her name was Mia. She brought a cake and light. He paused. A tear landed softly on the page, leaving a small mark next to her name. He didn't wipe it away. It belonged there. He closed the journal gently, placed it back on the desk, and exhaled. Not from exhaustion, but from release. Somehow, in one rainy day, a little girl had done what time and money never could. She reminded him that love, though buried, could still bloom in the most unexpected places. The seasons had passed, one after another, quietly reshaping the world with time's gentle hand. Leaves had fallen, snow had come and gone, and now the trees wore green again, dancing in the summer wind. It was July 4th, but this year the air felt different. Not heavy, not hollow. The sun filtered through the clouds with soft warmth, and the park, once filled with shadows, now carried laughter. On the same familiar bench, two figures sat side by side. Raymond, no longer wearing his grey suit, but a light blue sweater that matched the calm in his eyes. And beside him, Mia, a year taller, her braid longer, her smile just as bright. She held a box on her lap, a new chocolate cake, neatly decorated, with smoother frosting and sprinkles scattered like confetti. This time, she had help from the bakery lady and a little extra frosting from her mom. Raymond opened a small paper bag and pulled out 2 candles. He handed one to Mia with a knowing smile. "No matches needed this year," he chuckled, pulling out a small lighter. "We come prepared now, don't we?" Mia giggled and unwrapped the box. They placed the cake gently between them on the bench, right where they'd first shared a moment of silence that had changed everything. They pressed the 2 candles into the center, one pink, one white, standing tall side by side. The flames flickered to life moments later, bright and steady, like the bond between them. "One's for Emily," Mia said softly. "And the other?" Raymond asked, raising an eyebrow with a smile. She glanced up at him. "The other's for kindness." He nodded. "A very important candle." Birds chirped above them, and the scent of the nearby flower beds drifted on the breeze. They didn't sit in silence like they had a year ago. They shared stories now. Raymond told her about the time Emily tried to bake a cake and filled it with jelly beans for magic. Mia laughed so hard she nearly dropped her fork. "Did it work?" she asked, eyes wide. "It exploded in the oven," he replied, but she swore it was the best explosion ever. They both laughed, their joy echoing through the park. Not loudly, but just enough to let the wind carry it forward. Between bites of cake, they passed around stories like candles lighting other candles. No one flame lessened, just multiplied. That was the magic of sharing. Mia pulled out a new card she had made the night before. She handed it to Raymond with a shy smile. This one said, "Traditions aren't made from perfection, they're made from love." He opened it slowly, his heart softening as he read the words, "You're wise beyond your years, you know that?" She shrugged. "My mom says I've got an old soul." They watched the candles burn, not in grief, but in gratitude. And when the flames began to flicker lower, Raymond didn't feel loss. He felt warmth. The bench wasn't just a bench anymore. It was a place of memory, of healing, of return. A space where pain met peace and chose to sit down beside it, hand in hand. People passed them by, joggers, strollers, kids with balloons. Some smiled, some nodded, but most never knew what sacred thing had bloomed right there on that simple wooden seat. As the sun lowered gently into the horizon, Raymond looked at Mia and said, "Same time next year?" She grinned, "And every year after that." He placed his hand over his heart, where Emily's photo still lived, tucked inside his coat, but it didn't ache anymore. It simply reminded him she was still part of every July 4th. They watched the final candle burn low together, not with sadness, but with a sense of something continuing, a love passed forward, one small flame at a time.